Here at the International Printing Museum in Carson, California, we have dozens and dozens of platen presses dating back to the middle of the 19th century by different manufacturers, different sizes, different models and all. This is sort of the granddaddy of them all. This is known as the Gordon Job Press. George Phineas Gordon being the one who invented and developed the platen press as we all understand it. And of course, keep in mind that the press eventually, the one that everybody would recognize today would be the Chandler and Price C&P platen press. That was made up through the 1960s. But George Phineas Gordon, in coming up with this, he called it the Franklin Press. And the Franklin Press, it was given that name because he said that he was a 19th century spiritualist. He said that Benjamin Franklin, none other than Benjamin Franklin, the famous printer of the colonial period, inspired him in a dream of how to make this press. We think George Phineas Gordon there was probably drinking a few too many fluids that night before. Pressman's solvent, we also like to call it. But Gordon, and this particular one, by the way, which is from the 1873, is known as the brass arm Gordon because of the brass arms on the side that actually hold the ink rollers, which are missing on the press right now, and they had a wear factor to it. But there's a reference in the history of platen presses, the brass arm Gordon. This is one of those ones. Very few have survived. So let's get our press in operation. The basic design of a platen press that everybody else copied for the most part. But I'd like to show you the connection this has to the other press, the one that really did inspire him before he had that dream, and that's Stephen Ruggles and his Ruggles Rotary Job Press, which we have here in the collection. So here is the press that actually inspired George Phineas Gordon to invent what would be called the standard platen press, the standard job platen press in 1858. He credited that invention to Stephen Ruggles, whose earlier press inspired him to develop his platen press. This is known as the Ruggles Rotary Job Press, dates back to the early 1850s. You do, of course, have a flywheel, just like on Gordon's press there. The platen is the flat surface right here in the middle, and your letters are locked in on the opposite side here. What makes this one a rotary press is that the rollers in the printing will actually travel 360 degrees around this whole drum, this cylinder. They travel around, and they're able to do that because there's two arms holding the cylinder in place, one here at the top, one that you can't really see that's down here at the bottom. So at any moment, one of the arms is engaged, holding the cylinder, keeping it from moving. To set up your job, you can lift up one of the arms, comes out of the notch. The chase in the bed of the press is now facing up. That's where we can set our type, put our business card that's been hand set and typed, lock it in, put the cylinder back into position, and I'm going to be operating with a foot pedal at the bottom. The press was sold and in a crate. It was shipped in the crate, and then when it arrived, you'd use the crate to become the stand for the press. There's a bottom guide to hold the paper in place, and there's a lever here on the side that at a moment in the cycle, it will be depressed, it lifts up, and the card will actually fall down and drop into the box below. So you don't have to take the paper out. We're just going to put the paper in. It's called a job press because it did most of the jobs in the shop other than large format or a newspaper. You'd have a Washington press or a cylinder press for that. This is printing handbills, flyers, cards, everything else. This is one of the standard things that printers are doing between printing the weekly newspaper or the daily newspaper, is doing the jobs required in town. The motion going, so you can see the rollers traveling 360 degrees around on the press. The cards drop, fall into the box. Only about less than 5 or 6 of these presses have survived. It's a very rare machine. Quite an unusual operation by having those rollers travel 360 degrees around that cylinder, spreading the ink out on the drum. We even have I'd call it the brother of this press, sort of the kid brother, dating back to about the same time, which we acquired a few years ago out of New Jersey. An equipment dealer had that there. Let me show you that press. So what we have here in this very odd looking tabletop press is the brother of the Ruggles rotary job press. This is the Ruggles card press, also from the 1850s, probably the late 1850s, I would guess. I was able to acquire this one from an equipment dealer on the East Coast, and he didn't know quite what he had, and I had to show up every few years over the course of 20 years, and all it was identified there was as a 5x7 press. And I don't think he knew what he had. I did. So we put together a deal for everything else, and then I threw this one in at the end. And I knew that this was a Ruggles because many of the parts and pieces are very similar to the Ruggles rotary job press. But you get to crank this one with your hand. This one, of course, is missing several parts and pieces. The rollers would be up at the top here. You get the ink. Your letters are locked inside the press here. And you actually use your other hand to hand feed it in. And if you leave your hand in there too long, it gets crunched. You have only yourself to blame for cranking it with your right hand. That would be a very painful lesson. And of course the card does drop down automatically because there's a lever here that's going to be depressed, and it lifts up a bottom guide and it shoots down there at the bottom. And this would be for basically doing quick printing of cards, business cards or small labels. Very unusual survivor. Something else that I think is very interesting, if you're familiar with platen presses, you have to rotate the ink disc to spread the ink out evenly every time it's printing. And on this one, the plate here will move side to side during the operation when it's connected correctly. So it just goes in back and forth, side to side, and spreads the ink out. Very unusual. Now, the story of Ruggles and his press does not end in the 1850s or 1860s. It's actually goes 100 years past that into the 1960s. And I'm going to show you that press and finish up our story about Ruggles and his impact of the platen press. The last incarnation of Ruggles' amazing press is this one here. This is a press, the same basic design. It's like reviving the patents from 100 years before. Is manufactured by the Adana Press company in England, in London. There they are located there. They made the small printing presses in London for the European market. It's like the English version of the Kelsey press. They had the tabletop, what looks like a Kelsey, and some other ones like that. And then they had this floor model, treadle operated or with a motor with a flywheel on the side. And they used the whole concept that Ruggles had come up with. So you have a drum, the cylinder here with the ink that's over there, and you're going to feed your paper into the press. So the rollers would be traveling 360 degrees around the cylinder. My rollers are actually not on the press. This right here is actually what spreads the ink out. It has a worm drive on the side. You do have to take your paper in and out. It doesn't drop out automatically there for you. This came out of a convent in the state of Washington. They were using this press. I think it dates back to the late 1950s. Still in very good operating condition when all the parts and pieces are on there. But one of the fun side stories on this, we were cleaning the press up and looked for the serial number. We found out where the serial number was at. And here it is, right here on the press. And the serial number, if you can believe it, is 666. The printing press that came out of the convent with the nuns has a serial number of 666. But Ruggles and his design lasted a long time, still working today. That's my little short story connecting the worlds of these two amazing inventors, Stephen Ruggles and George Phineas Gordon, giving us the platen press, both of the 19th century and the 20th century, and how both of their creative ideas lasted through the era of the platen press.